If you would like to listen to or download any or all of Power at Work's blogcasts in podcast form, they are available for streaming and download on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast. Just search Power at Work on any podcast platform and enjoy all of Power at Work's podcasts. While you're there, two things we would like you to do. First, subscribe, and that way you won't miss any Power at Work podcasts. Second, please give Power at Work a 5-star rating, a like, a love, whatever is the tool that your podcast provider gives you. It helps others who care about workers and worker power to find Power at Work's content. They will be grateful, and so will we. Hello, powerful people, and welcome to the Power Half Hour live on LinkedIn and published for posterity on Power at Work US. I'm Seth Harris from the Burns Center for Social Change. Hey, the Power Half Hour brings you more voices, more news, and more worker power insights in just 30 minutes. I've got an expert panel of 3 guests who I'll introduce you to in just a moment. Our video audience can see them arrayed in front of you, but you'll get to know them better in just a few minutes. The panelists are going to talk about the big stories and biggest developments affecting worker power, workers, and unions, and important worker power developments that are going to arrive in the near-term future. And then at the very end, as like a little, tiny little, like that mint that you have at the end of a meal kind of gift, we're going to invite our guests to offer shameless plugs and shout-outs. They can promote whatever or whoever they would like, and self-promotion is enthusiastically encouraged. And then, audience, if you're hungry for more, stay with us for the Power Half Hour. Overtime, we'll take questions and comments from our live audience. We already have some questions and comments from our Power at Work community that were sent to us by email. I will tell you during overtime how you can send an email to us so that we ask your questions during the next overtime. It won't be today, but we will start overtime in about 28 minutes. Before I introduce you to the people who are going to make you smarter today, audience, stay up to date with the Power Half Hour by following the Power at Work page on LinkedIn and subscribing to poweratwork.us. Just go to poweratwork.us. A subscription box will pop up. Just give us your name and your email address. We promise, pinky swear, we will not sell it or give it away. And now let's meet our guests from the People's Republic of Ithaca, New York. She's the very recently retired Director of Labor Education Research and a senior lecturer at Cornell University's School of Industrial and Labor Relations. It's Kate Bronfenbrenner. Hi, Kate.
Hi, great to be here.
Great to have you here. And from the happiest place on earth, unless you believe in justice and fairness for working people, Orlando, Florida. She's a reporter covering labor and politics for the Orlando Weekly. Another returning guest, McKenna Schueler's here, everybody. Hi, McKenna.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
It's a privilege, a pleasure. And from the Rocket City of Huntsville, Alabama, he's the president of the North Alabama Area Labor Council. I've got to get that right for copyright reasons. And he's also the co-host of the Valley Labor Report. It's our friend, Jacob Morrison. Jacob, great to have you back on Power at Work.
It's great to be here.
All right, topic number 1 panel. We're going to start with you, Kate. We're looking over our shoulder. We're looking in the rearview mirror. Tell us what was the most important or most interesting development or the biggest news story affecting worker power, workers, unions, or worker collective action over the last couple of weeks. Kate.
Well, I think maybe the most important labor issue happening right now is what's happening to immigrant workers. And 4 days ago, in Maine, the Maine State AFL-CIO spoke out at a press event, telling ICE that to stand down, joining labor councils across the country and more unions that are actually taking a strong stand on ICE. And what's important about this is that unlike before, where the response in Minnesota was because they were union members who were killed, this is now speaking up for immigrant workers who are not represented by unions. And, we've seen it in Minnesota and Oregon, and we've seen Washington State. The first union to speak up to say to abolish ICE was National Nurses United. The AFA, the flight attendants, SEIU have also taken a strong stand. The AFL-CIO is at the convention. It was very interesting. The very unions that, in previous conventions had spoken out against immigrants were now speaking for immigrant rights, such as the machinists and the National Association of Building Trades Unions. And so it should be a much stronger stand, and we need more unions speaking up and standing up more actively. I feel like a corner has been turned, and we're seeing more and more unions understanding that immigrant rights are workers' rights, and defending immigrants from deportation should be the most important thing unions focus on.
Now, where would you, if you were going to predict where that stream of thinking goes, particularly with respect to politics, do we now think that the labor movement will be pushing candidates or scoring candidates based on the positions they take with respect to abolishing ICE, for example?
Certainly the healthcare unions will, and I think also teachers and other unions who see that this has had a direct effect on their members. But I think it's also the building trades unions are being affected. They have many immigrant members. So I think we're going to see increasingly this is an issue where it was one that, before you could predict that SEIU and Unite Here and then you might say something. Now it's hitting, from industrial unions to building trades unions, as well as the service and public sector unions. Are they gonna make that be a litmus test? Very few are, but I think more are going to push on that issue.
Very interesting. All right, McKenna, let's look back a couple of weeks. What's the biggest story, most interesting story, most important development affecting workers' unions and worker power?
Yeah, so this is a little bit under the radar, but I believe it does have some national implications. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke to a couple security guards at SeaWorld in Orlando. They became the first group of workers in SeaWorld Orlando's history last year to form a union with the Security, Police, and Fire Professionals of America for higher pay and more safety on the job. The union also represents security at Disney World, one of their competitors. But as of this month, SeaWorld is now refusing to recognize their union or begin contract negotiations. It's my understanding the union filed an unfair labor practice complaint last year against SeaWorld, arguing bad faith bargaining. But last month, SeaWorld reportedly informed the union that they no longer recognize it, and they are trying to evade their ULP by joining major corporations like Amazon and Starbucks that are arguing the NLRB is unconstitutional and thus they don't have to recognize its authority. And this shift was particularly interesting to me because I had just reported on another tourism industry leader, a restaurant operator for Disney World, called the Patina Group, which is a subsidiary of Delaware North. They similarly responded to ULP complaints by arguing the NLRB is unconstitutional back in May, I believe. And that was after a regional director issued a complaint ordering the Patina Group to offer reinstatement and back pay to a young cashier who they unlawfully allegedly fired in response to her pro-union organizing activity. So I'm honestly kind of wondering at this point a little bit if the legal counsel for some of these tourism industry leaders are sort of colluding or whether they're just gaining this confidence under the Trump administration to question or challenge the NLRB's unconstitutionality or its constitutionality, I should say, under the Trump administration to see what they can really get away with.
Yeah, so I think it might even be more venal and conspiratorial than that. So there is a decision in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, which does not include Florida. Florida is in the 11th Circuit. The Fifth Circuit has essentially held the NLRB unconstitutional. So there's no National Labor Relations Board and essentially no private sector labor law in the Fifth Circuit. It is entirely possible that there is a push in the management bar to push the issue of the constitutionality of the NLRB in other circuits, particularly in other circuits where they are likely to be successful. And I think it's reasonable to assume that the 11th Circuit, which tends to be more conservative, the Fifth Circuit is entirely lawless and it's entirely political. The 11th Circuit, you have some lawyers on the court, and so they are politically conservative. it is possible that the management bar is trying to get another decision declaring that the NLRB is unconstitutional, or get a decision that's in conflict with the Fifth Circuit decision so they can get to the Supreme Court. I don't know that. It certainly smells like it to me, because you typically, the management bar gets together in conferences and other places, and there are trainings, and they're all members of associations together. They talk about this kind of stuff. They strategize about this kind of stuff. So I would not be surprised if those lawyers representing SeaWorld were part of an effort to try and get this case up to the Supreme Court to see if they can't wipe out the NLRB and the National Labor Relations Act entirely. I'd like to be wrong, but it seems too likely to me to not even mention here. McKenna, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised if they are sort of working with other legal counsel and stuff. I'm interested to see where it goes. I'm not as informed on the legalities and the details of these cases, but it does seem to be something that's popping up increasingly in Central Florida. So I'm trying to learn more about it and to kind of find those through lines and connections.
Interesting. All right, Jacob. So we've launched a conspiracy theory here. Can you match that?
I don't know if I can match the conspiracy theory, but I think that something huge that has happened that I have been, sort of shocked to see a lot. Basically, nobody talking about it is Trump officially withdrawing or refusing to renew the USMCA early in July. And I guess it's probably
just for the uninitiated, the USMCA is
the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, NAFTA 2.0. It's Trump's renegotiation of NAFTA, which he did back in 2020, 2021, whenever that was, and so he has opted not to renew it at this point, and so that triggers a 10-year cool down. And I guess maybe that's why there's not so much news about it right now, because there's not immediate ramifications. The deal is still in place and will still be in place for the next 10 years and can be renewed at any time during the next 10 years. So maybe the thinking among Mexico and Canada is that the next president will come in and renew it, but it feels like a pretty big thing that the president is not renewing the USMCA, and that but because USMCA NAFTA has had such a huge impact. And I also think that it's an indictment on his own legacy, because he did the USMCA, he called it the best trade deal ever, and trade deficits, manufacturing trade deficits specifically, have increased since the USMCA was implemented. The UAW just put out a white paper just a couple of days actually before the U.S. withdrew from the USMCA, detailing some of that and some of the other failures of the USMCA. So, I mean, we're looking at potentially huge shifts in the North American trade landscape, which will affect workers as the implementation of these trade deals did. And I think it has a big, it's a big indictment on Trump's ability to get things done.
Let me just say, I agree with. Oh, please go ahead, Kate.
Today's news that Trump put back 50% tariffs in Canada, and some of them appear to be in violation of the trade agreement. And so I think this all goes together, right? He is not interested in trade agreement with Mexico and Canada.
Right. And I do want to say really quickly before my time is up here, I just want to pay tribute to Vonda McDaniel. She was the president of the Nashville Labor Council. She died a few weeks ago, very unexpectedly, and she leaves a huge hole in the Southern labor movement. I mean, personally, she was a big mentor for me. I would, constantly asking her questions, and she was very generous with her time and was always supportive of what we were doing at the North Alabama Labor Council. And so losing her is, it's huge. And seeing, I was able to attend her funeral, and there were so many people. I mean, Liz Schueler was there, Fred Redmond was there, the mayor of Nashville was there, Kamala Harris sent her regards personally. And so, she was such a powerful figure in the Southern labor movement, affected so many people's lives, and did so much with the time that she had. And I miss her a lot, and we are worse for her absence.
I want to second everything you said about Vonda. She was also a big supporter of Power at Work and was a guest on Power at Work and was just absolutely fantastic. Just I'll add a thought on Canada and Mexico. Trump has people purportedly negotiating with Mexico over the next version of the USMCA, but it's unimaginable for the reason that Kate mentioned that we'll be able to cut a deal with Canada because we keep hitting them in the head with a baseball bat, economically speaking. And the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, has basically said we need to disentangle ourselves from our relationship with the United States. There's always going to be trade. They're our second largest trading partner, but Mark Carney wants to have much more expansive relationships with other countries so the Canadian economy is less dependent upon the American economy. That doesn't sound like the fixins for a very successful trade relationship. Mexico and Canada are our two largest trading partners. They matter a lot to us in a whole host of ways, and Trump is on the verge of destroying those relationships, at least the Canadian relationship. He seems to get along with President Sheinbaum of Mexico. I think she is a very successful Trump charmer, as disgusting as that sounds. I apologize for even introducing that idea into people's minds. Okay, topic number 2, panel. We're getting out our telescopes and looking down the road, way down the road. And let me say, we're not going to look to 2087. We're going to look over the next few days, next few weeks, next few months, maybe next few years, and try to answer this question. What will be the most important story or development or innovation or event affecting workers, worker power, and unions in that near-term future? McKenna, you're going to start us off.
Yeah, it's always so hard to pick one development. But one thing that I've been following that has been discussed on Power at Work before, Florida passed a law this year that will make it a lot harder for most public sector unions in the state to remain certified. And that law just took effect this month, July 1st. In Florida, about 26% of Florida's public sector is unionized compared to about 3 to 4% of the private sector. So this could really take a hit on Florida's labor movement if unions are unable to comply with the new rules. And I do think it's important to highlight this for a national audience, as I've done several times before on this podcast, just because we've seen Florida positioned as this sort of ground zero for right-wing policies that have proliferated throughout the Republican-controlled states, I should say, targeting transgender rights, DEI, worker protections, and have now also appeared or otherwise aligned with the federal government under the Trump administration. So I think Florida could really stand to serve as an example of another union-busting tactic. And so what this new law does a few things, but arguably the most critical provision of this for unions is that it creates a new threshold for union elections, including recertification elections that most unions are required to go through now if they have less than 60% membership density. So similar to laws in Wisconsin and Iowa, elections will now require at least 50% voter turnout for the elections to or the results to really matter. And then a simple majority of those who vote must vote in favor of forming, recertifying, or even decertifying a union. And as somebody who's been tracking public sector election results for the past year and a half, I can tell you that turnout is often pretty low, even though in most of these cases, workers have overwhelmingly voted in favor of keeping their unions. And there have been hundreds of recertification elections so far since they were first required under this separate 2023 anti-union law. And one interesting development I have learned is just this month, I learned from the state that this new law will only apply to elections involving representation or recertification petitions that were filed after July 1st. So based on how long I've observed it takes between like a petition filing and an election actually happening, it could still take like another month or even a few months before we really start seeing the impact of this new threshold. But so that's something I'm keeping my eye on. And we just saw Florida's largest teachers union, the United Teachers of Dade, for instance, recently recertified their union this month, not knowing if that new threshold would be applied. And luckily for them, it wasn't, because their voter turnout was just under 50%. But they also have a bargaining unit of 23,000 workers. So that was pretty impressive. They managed to reach 49% turnout.
Yeah, so give us a sense of what you think is going to happen. So it's going to be very expensive for unions to undertake the organizing necessary to drive the kind of voter turnout that's needed in order to be successful under this law. Do you think that's what's going to happen? Because we know that the 2023 law had a meaningfully negative effect, particularly on some of the higher education unions and some other unions in the state. Are we going to see a more dramatic decline now, or do you think the unions are sort of ready to do the organizing that's necessary to meet these thresholds?
I do think, similar to when the 2023 law was first implemented, I do think we're going to see a first initial kind of major purge. That is what I am anticipating based on the voter turnout that I've seen. I still I still want to talk to more union leaders about what their strategy is, but I imagine the strategy is to hopefully get dues paying membership above 60% so they don't have to go through these elections. But also, it's just going to be a lot harder for bigger bargaining units for sure to get that voter turnout up if they do have to go through that. But yeah, I really do want to hopefully learn more about what the strategy is for these different smaller bargaining units, larger bargaining units. The teachers unions have been particularly resilient since that 2023 law was passed. But again, voter turnout is sometimes low in these cases. So I think it's going to be important to see whether they're going to either be able to get the dues paying membership up or get the vote out enough to get people to make sure that they vote in these recertification elections.
Yeah. All right, Jacob, look down the road. Tell us what's coming at us.
So August 6th is the Knox County mayoral election, Knox County, Tennessee, and the Democrat in that race is Bo Hawk. He is the president of the Knoxville Oak Ridge Central Labor Council. He is a member of the Iron Workers Union, and he is the representative for the Knoxville Building and Construction Trades Council. He is a former Teamster, and so his union credentials are really unquestionable. And he has been in that role for, as president of the Labor Council, I think for the last 5 years or so, and has really built the Labor Council up, is increased affiliation there by a significant amount, and has increased market share for the building trades unions in Knoxville and Oak Ridge. And so he's a really exciting candidate, I think, for us, people who are, interested in unions and worker power. But he's done a campaign based on affordability, on lowering the cost of housing, on childcare, on transportation, and things like that are really, it seems to me, resonating with the people of Knox County. He has raised more money than the Republican, and has done so despite the fact that the Republican has lent her campaign $160,000, something like that, personally. And he has beat that with all small dollar donations. His average donation is like $80 or something like that. And the support of union PAC contributions. He is turning out big crowds to his events, all of their community forums that I've watched, where they don't exactly structure them as debates. I haven't seen that, but they do these community forums where people ask the candidates questions. The crowds it seems like it's like a 95% Bo Hawk crowd based on the response from the audience, and so I think it's a really exciting thing, and I think he's going to win. This is the place where the current mayor is termed out, and the current mayor is professional wrestler Kane. For those of you who are WWE fans, he's the Undertaker's brother, real name Glenn Jacobs. He's termed out. He served 2 terms, but his last election, he was only reelected as a quote-unquote popular Republican governor by 10 points against a no-name, no money, no infrastructure Democrat who will openly tell you that they just wanted to put their name on the ballot so people had an option. And Glenn Jacobs only beat that person by 10 points. Bo Hawk is not that person. He's got a real campaign. He's got real money, and people are excited. And so, I think he's going to win, and it's really exciting. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
And this is a really good year to be a working class Democrat running for office. It just is. I mean, it's all the right issues mix for folks to win those kinds of elections. I really like that one. I mean, I got to say, I think that's the longest conversation I've had about Knoxville politics, maybe in my entire life. All right, Kate Bronfenbrenner, tell us what's coming down the pike to the people who want to care about worker power, workers, and unions.
So in this week of, smoke in the air, heat, floods, I think the issue that's coming up is data centers. It's going to be a very divisive issue in the labor movement, but most importantly, dividing the labor movement from the public. The public 70% oppose data centers construction. The labor movement overwhelmingly supports it. It even at the convention there was no really any debate about it, and some fairly weak guide rails were agreed to, but the fact is that it is seen it's the ultimate jobs and environment debate. But this is a time when labor really needs the public support, and to be going against the public on an issue like that, I think in the future is going to be very hurtful for labor. There are some unions that have stood up and spoken out. Again, NNU, the National Nurses United, has taken a leading role. The flight attendants have. Other unions like SEIU have supported stronger restrictions than the AFL-CIO resolution. But still, the majority of unions are looking at this as jobs, and the data does appears to show that it's not going to be, the number of jobs gained is going to be much smaller than the number of jobs lost and the damage to communities. And that reminder again and again that it is workers and union members who live in those communities that are going to be hurt. So I think this is going to be a critical issue. And just like immigration years ago, where labor was on the wrong side and it hurt it, again, labor's going to be in the wrong side. I just want to add one thing to what McKenna said, which
Please.
is that it's good to look at organizing under the Railway Act, which had majority status required. And what employers did is the employer campaigns were focused entirely on suppressing the vote. They used tactics to suppress turnout. And I think we're probably going to see that in Florida and other states. And that unions have to be really creative and aggressive in how they get turnout, enthusiastic turnout. And it's a different kind of employer strategy.
Okay, we're going to turn to topic number 3, shameless plugs and shout outs. We have time for our guests to each take a minute to shout out or plug anybody or anything they would like. Jacob Morrison, what is your shameless plug or shout out?
Subscribe to our newsletters at tvlr.fm. We have 2, Boss Watch and Last Week in Southern Labor. Boss Watch collects where employers have been caught breaking the law in some way, whether that's harassing their employees, stealing from them, endangering them. We collect all of those from the South and put it in one newsletter. And then Last Week in Southern Labor does a similar thing, but with with the way that workers are moving. So union elections, contract negotiations, political updates across the South. We try to compile as much as we can. So you can subscribe to that newsletter at tvlr.fm.
Excellent. Kate Bronfenbrenner, what is your shameless plug or shout out?
I want to give a plug for 2 reporters and their articles. One is Robert Mitchell in Computer World, and the other is Brittany Wong in Huffington Post, who've really taken on these myths about tech workers organizing and kind of opened it up, challenging the stereotypes about tech workers and why tech workers are organized. And part of this came about because our vice president cast aspersions at young workers who just sit at their computers all day and have fake jobs. But also just the idea that tech workers don't want unions. So 2 excellent articles.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let me just say the irony of a vice president of the United States accusing other people of having a fake job. Can't let that go by. All right, McKenna Schueler, what is your shameless plug or shout out?
I wanted to highlight an interesting community-facing campaign that was launched a few months ago by two Unite Here locals here in Orlando who represent Disney World workers. A new campaign that they've launched in collaboration with the local teachers union. For months now, they've been knocking on doors, canvassing the community to raise awareness about a dozen lawsuits that have been filed by Disney against the county over its property tax assessments. Disney argues its assessments have been excessive, and they've been filing similar lawsuits for years, clawing back millions of dollars from the county as Disney continues to rake in billions of dollars in revenue each year. Now it's caught the attention of unions because the Orange County School District here in Orlando has set aside $119 million to settle those lawsuits, and that's come up in bargaining talks, as you can imagine. So they've launched this campaign to urge Disney to drop the lawsuits and also just raise public awareness about this issue. And I thought that was really interesting.
I think it's absolutely interesting. All right, audience, stick with us if you can. We're going to begin Power Half Hours overtime in just a minute for Kate Bronfenbrenner, McKenna Schueler, Jacob Morrison, and our producer, Ayush Kanvalkar. Thank you so much for joining us on the Power Half Hour. Stick around for overtime. For right now, stay powerful. All right, guests, take a breather, take a sip of water. We're going to assemble our questions. Ayush is gathering the questions right now, and he's going to put them in the chat, and I will read them to you. Audience, let me tell you first, if you have a question and you're in the live audience, go ahead and post it right on LinkedIn. Ayush will keep going back there to check and make sure. If you have a question, we're happy to ask it on air during this show. But if you would like to send us an email instead, we'll answer your question with a different panel during our next overtime, which will be in 2 weeks. You can submit a question by sending an email to poweratwork@theburnscenter.org. That's poweratwork@THEBURNES center.org. Theburnscenter.org. We'll save your question for next time. And we're going to start with the questions we received before the episode, and I'll just take them from the top. First question from a member of the Power at Work community. I just cannot, this is them speaking, not me. I just cannot believe our president is so incompetent that he can't end a war with Iran that he started. How are working class people going to survive gas prices that are over $4 a gallon again? Actually, gas prices have risen about 15% over the course of the week, as have oil prices. Oil prices are back at around mid-$80. The Brent crude benchmark is back. The price of diesel has increased dramatically. Actually, it's gone up something like 45% since the beginning of the year. And that takes a big bite out of working people's budgets. So how are working class people going to survive gas prices that are over $4 a gallon again? Anybody want to jump in on that one? We may be stumped.
I mean, I think that the reaction from the panel is sounds like it's basically that it's going to be hard, right? And that the answer is that we need to, we need to organize against it, against what the administration is doing, and that's, I think, going to require voting in a Congress that's going to hold him to account, that's going to retake their authority to wage and declare war, or to not do it, as the situation demands. And so, how are we going to? That's the way that we survive it. Is we've got to take some of the power away from the administration.
Yeah.
I would argue there just needs to be a lot more kind of worker to worker education about the connection between the policy, the trade and military policies of the administration and what's happening in the economy, because those connections are pretty stark, but it's important to explain them and get that out there.
I think I've been really impressed by how the discourse has been quite focused on that. I just don't have any sense. So, I'm obviously I'm not the typical worker, because I'm following the news and I'm reading traditional news sources and others. So I don't know if that is penetrating. Do you have any sense of whether or not, working class people are seeing what's going on with their gas prices and saying, this all happened because of this stupid war in the Middle East. Do you have any sense of that?
I think, I mean, we have this division and for the work, we have that solid chunk that just supports Trump no matter what. And I think, but when the more that connection is made clear, to see that, I think would be important. I think, and there's a lot of regional variation in the impact. The South is obviously hit the hardest, economically, and and I think making those connections and getting to see is really important.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, second question. Very, very exciting to see, says our listener, very, very exciting to see that the AFT has reached almost 1.9 million members. This is a union that right-wingers have been trying to kill for years, along with public education, but they just keep growing and growing and growing. Are there lessons from the AFT for other unions? I believe the AFT, probably the spark for this question was the AFT, I believe, just had its convention, and they announced a membership number that was, I believe, 1.885 million or almost 1.9 million members, which is fairly substantial growth. I believe last year it was something like 1.7 million. What I don't know is how much of that is from organizing, from clean organizing, how much of that is from growth in the places they already represent people. It's hard to imagine that would be true in public education. And then how much of it is from affiliation. So, for example, not too many years ago, my union, the American Association of University Professors, affiliated with the AFT, and that significantly bumped up the membership. It wasn't a million new members, but it was a couple of 100,000, I believe, a couple of 100,000 new members. So are there lessons from the AFT for other unions? Anybody want to jump in on that?
I think there's some things that, first of all, Trump has done great organizing for the AFT. I mean, teachers are angry. Teachers are striking and organizing because they're angry. A significant part of the growth is also graduate students who are also frustrated and adjuncts.
Oh, yes, I didn't mention that. Yes, that's right. But I didn't mention that.
I think what the teachers have been doing right, that's very important, is this idea of organizing on broader social issues that resonate with the public, that whether it's called organizing for the common good or other things, they're talking about the issues that matter not just to the teachers as workers, but to the parents and to the children and to the community members. And I think that that has been very effective in building public support, despite all the anti-teacher rhetoric coming from the government. And that has helped the teacher unions grow.
Yeah. McKenna, what's your sense you mentioned the teachers unions when you were talking about the assault by the right wing on public sector unionism, and the teachers unions were the principal targets of these anti-union laws when they were originally put in place in 2023, but they're surviving. And I wouldn't say they're thriving, but they're surviving. Any sense of why that's the case?
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely had many years to kind of build their organizing tactics. The Florida legislature has been trying to attack teachers unions even before 2023. Teachers unions were specifically held to like higher thresholds than other unions. So the Florida Education Association, which is both an AFT affiliate and an NEA affiliate, is very used to responding to these attacks. And I would say after the 2023 law was passed, teachers unions have been the most resilient. I've talked to teachers who have talked about how, as unfortunate as the law has been and how difficult it has been to navigate and stressful, it has also forced a lot of, worker to worker conversations and really made union members and union leaders have to question what is necessary to survive and how can we reach more people. And they have been more effective, I think, in some cases that I've seen and that I've heard in, building their ranks and mobilizing people. And so, I'm not surprised to see that the AFT is building its membership. And I think that the teachers unions too have also really been good at what Kate mentioned in terms of like trying to connect even their bargaining to other social issues in the community, and really trying to reach the community in terms of what they're fighting for and how that's really a fight for public schools and also for students.
Yeah, that has long been the focus of the AFT, and I can't let this conversation end, the AFT conversation end, without shouting out my friend Randy Weingarten, the president of the AFT, also an alum, a fellow alum of the School of Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell. Randy and I met when she was a lawyer at the United Federation of Teachers, the New York City affiliate of the union. So she's been in the union for more than 40 years. She was a high school teacher. And she's been a fantastic leader and has been unafraid to take on the groups like Moms for Liberty and other right-wing sort of fascistic groups that are trying to turn public schools into right-wing indoctrination centers, some of them Christian indoctrination centers. And she's been unafraid to take them on. She has been a target of those folks. But she has responded through organizing, which is exactly the way you want the union movement to respond. Now, a lot of the organizing has happened, there's a lot of union density in public education, so a lot of the organizing has happened in other fields, in healthcare, for example, and home health and other spaces, and graduate students in higher education. But yeah, they are a success story. They're now the AFT is the second largest union in the AFL-CIO. They were the largest until SEIU reaffiliated. And SEIU, let me just say, getting ready for a gigantic jump in their membership with the rideshare drivers in Massachusetts and California and potentially Illinois. Let me just say, I'm all for competition among the big unions about who can be the biggest in the AFL-CIO. I want them to compare and feel jealous about one another and compete to get as big as they possibly can. That would be good for working people. All right, third question. Oh, I was surprised that nobody mentioned this, so I will go ahead and I'm glad we got this question. I read, said as our listener, that Maine's unions played a huge role in making Troy Jackson the candidate who is probably going to replace Graham Plattner in Maine's U.S. Senate race. Why can't you? I love these questions. I love that setup. I mean, that's a great setup and you're feeling good about yourself. And then why can't unions play that kind of role, lifting up working class pro-union candidates in other elections, like the Democratic candidate for president? Come on, that's a juicy softball over the center of the plate. Go ahead, Jacob. I know you want to talk about this, Jacob. Go ahead.
Well, it's my answers to this always make me lots of friends. But the labor movement is just it's a sort of small c conservative institution. We see this in lots of like primary elections across the country. You see the labor movement generally. I mean, Maine has been surprisingly an outlier here. Unions were some of the first people to get behind Plattner too. And I think part of that is because Janet Mills was uniquely odious to the labor movement. Like she had really upset unions and working people in the state of Maine, and so they were more willing to do that. And in other places where the Democratic sort of establishment is willing to allow unions to just sort of live and let live with the labor movement, then the labor movement has so far been less willing to rock the boat with that relationship and get behind people who want to really fundamentally change things in favor of working people. But and so I think that's the state of play. Why can't unions do that? Because if you why can't they? I'm not sure. I mean, they can, and I think they're starting to. Why don't they? The answer to that question is that if you buck the Democratic establishment, then the Democratic establishment, I think, is more likely and will try to retaliate against you, where there is not really a penalty for not backing the progressive challenger. Because what is the progressive challenger? That's like part of their whole bit, right? Is that they like unions, they like working people, and so they're not going to punish you when they get into office. And so that's a reason that plays out. But I do think that unions are getting more and more willing to start trying to put people like that up. I mean, I just talked about Bo Hawk. I think last time I was on, we talked about the state senator in Texas who's a machinist union member who just got elected to the state Senate. So I think that we're starting to see the labor movement and the AFL-CIO try to get people and try to get their labor councils and their unions to put people up for local office, and that's going to create more of a bench for people. I don't know about a candidate for president, but for Congress and Senate and governor.
Yeah, well, the only way you can have a working class candidate for president of the United States is to win city council, mayoral, state senate, state House of Representatives, congressional, gubernatorial, senatorial elections. So you've got a bench of people who come out of the labor movement, are connected to the labor movement, and are able to run for president of the United States. I'm not saying that Troy Jackson, who's a lumberman, is my understanding, that he is going to be a candidate for president of the United States, but he has a long, very close relationship with the Maine AFL-CIO. He's a former president of the state Senate in Maine. I think he was sort of Graham Plattner without the serious problems. Interesting. Anybody else want to jump in on that one?
I just, coming from New York State and watching how labor's responded to progressive candidates in New York State, there's the fear of they want to stay with incumbents, even when those incumbents haven't been great, but also they want to back the winner, and they have to gamble with these new candidates that come up. And so you saw with ALC or with Zohran Mamdani, the labor movement's hesitancy until, they completely didn't support AOC until, she won, and look, she's supporting us. It took till when she ran again with Mamdani, they didn't want to support him until after the primary. And that whole thing about, if you only want to support people you are thinking you're going to win, then you're never going to take a gamble on these new candidates, and that's a mistake.
Yeah, it's I think absolutely fascinating. In some places the labor movement is a part of the Democratic establishment. It just is entirely intertwined with the Democratic establishment. In other places, maybe where they're smaller, like the Maine labor movement is pretty small. It's a small state, but they're pretty small. Maybe you have a little bit more of a frontier edge to yourself. I don't know. I think it'd be an interesting. I look forward to Kate Bronfenbrenner's paper on this topic sometime in the near future. Okay, last question that we have from our audience. If Trump deports the TPS workers and other immigrant workers who are taking care of our parents and our disabled people, how are we going to get health care in this country? Kate, you were just talking about this. You want to jump in on that question?
I think that, the jobs that are particularly vulnerable, just the jobs they're talking about, whether it's the people building the roofs or the people caring for our grandparents and our children, these workers are the workers that affect the public very directly. And I think this is why it has to be a frontline issue for labor. It's not only is it morally the right thing to do, it's also in labor's interest to really fight on this issue. And, the Democratic Party has definitely been weak on this as well. And this is, this is the public, just like the public sees their prices going up, they see that they can't find care work, or their grandparent is not being taken care of. And I think these are central issues. It has to be not just an issue where at the polls you don't endorse unless the candidate stands up for immigrant rights, but also unions are going to have to go into the streets, and they have to force employers. They're going to have to make it a collective bargaining issue.
Yeah. So this is a statistic I've mentioned several times on Power at Work, and I also on television. The United States has 1 million fewer workers now than it did a year ago. And some of those people are the people exactly our questioner was asking about, right? People who are taking care of our parents, taking care of people with disabilities, taking care, they're the people who are cooking our meals, and they're the people who are working in meat packing houses and They're people who are absolutely essential to our economy, and you cannot grow an economy with a shrinking labor force, right? We can hope and pray for productivity growth from artificial intelligence. We're not seeing it in a meaningful way yet, and we're not going to see it enough to replace 1 million workers. But at least not in the near term. It's going to take a long time before we get to that, just as it did with the internet. And immigrant workers do the kind of work that, Kate, I agree with you completely on this. They do the kind of work that people are most likely to see and be affected by. And they are, it's going to cause real meaningful damage to our economy that they are gone. Healthcare is one of the few sectors in our economy that is growing right now. When it comes to jobs, most of the rest of the economy, it's social assistance and healthcare that explain all of the growth in the labor force over the last year and a half. And if you don't have people who are going to be willing to accept those jobs, that's going to stop happening, and the economy is going to continue to slow down. So it's bad for all of us. It's bad for the people who need that help. It's certainly bad for the immigrant workers. And it's bad for our culture to view those people as the other when really they are essential to our success as a society. Let me give anybody else a chance to jump in on that would like to do it. Can I do one thing while you guys are thinking about it? I want to shout out Kate, your former colleague, Patricia Campos Medina, the head of the Worker Institute at the ILR School, who has been just a phenomenal advocate for TPS workers, has a whole TPS worker project. We did a project with her on Power at Work, and we have a great blogcast up. I encourage everybody to take a look at that, talking about the intersection between TPS workers and the labor movement and worker power. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Anybody else want to jump in on the immigrant workers question?
Yeah, I'll just say, I actually was thinking about mentioning this earlier with the TPS issue specifically, because that's something I've been following in Central Florida, because Florida is home to, I think, nearly half of Haitian TPS holders. So that's been a big topic here. A lot of Haitian TPS holders work in healthcare, but also the tourism industry, which is a huge economic driver for Central Florida, but also the Sunshine State in general. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to be following those developments, and I've been trying to keep in contact with local folks who are, advocating for Haitian TPS holders. And Maxwell Frost, for instance, the congressman, recently held a press conference earlier this month to kind of like bring a lot of people together to speak on this issue. So I'm hoping to be able to keep in connection with them to learn more about how this is going to affect workers in Central Florida and the community.
You mentioned AI. I think it's important to point out that AI is never going to change adult diapers in a nursing home. AI is never going to do daycare. These jobs are not jobs that can be replaced with AI.
Yeah, a very, very, very
AI
important
can't pick
point.
crops.
Right. Very important point. Thank you so much to Kate Bronfenbrenner, McKenna Schueler, Jacob Morrison. Thank you, audience. Thank you, Ayush Kanvalkar, our producer. Thanks for being here. We will see you back here in 2 weeks, and I have no idea what date that is. It's sometime in August. We'll see you 2 weeks from today, Tuesday at noon Eastern Time for the next Power Half Hour episode. Until then, we'll see you on Power at Work again very soon. Are you looking for more labor radio shows and podcasts? Well, look no further. Go to the Labor Radio Podcast Network. The network connects more than 200 radio shows and podcasts. To find more great labor content, go to www.laborradionetwork.org. Power at Work is there. You should be too.